clarify where those go.
State and Kansas, let's see. This is kind of hard, if you guys want to come up afterwards, it's kind of a project outline. It has some of the utilities shown that we're going to replace on here. It's by no means a complete
Like
set of that, but
blocks of sewer, water.
why don't you come visit me after, and
Okay.
I'll go over it with you, and I'll show you what we'll be replacing in your area.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
I was just wondering if there was enough congestion, traffic congestion at Jackson and St. Joe to warrant a traffic light there, or what the plan is, or is there?
Yeah, I did not go into that, but one of the things we're having a traffic engineer look at is Ames Street may not have the traffic to warrant a signal right there. We're going to analyze that. It's an old signal, so if, instead of just going in and removing and replacing it without analyzing it, we're going to look at that, and we're also going to analyze the traffic counts on St. Joe. It may make more sense to remove that from Ames, put stop control on Ames, and move the signal to St. Joe, because there's a lot of people that use it. It's one of our only north-south corridors on the west side of the creek there, so there's a lot of people that use it. One of the factors and problems is the steep road to the west of the intersection, so in the sight distance, coming down that. Those are things that they'll look at. But yes, we have thought about that, and that's one of the things we'll look at. We may end up with no signals on the west side there. You don't know, it's either none, replace it at Ames, or we may move it to St. Joe.
We've had the same discussion over the years about how people are seeing this such a strange intersection. We have four-lane, two-lane, I go with the three-way. But honestly, we don't have actions. We have it set up as good as you can get it right now. Put a light there, but we don't know what happens. Like, we're really interested to see what comes out of this and traffic counts.
And these lights are a little bit different monster. Sometimes they're not even warranted. Like, we analyzed a Maine and Michigan one that was just redone. The actual amount of traffic on Michigan really didn't warrant the signal there. We could have had a level of service that was adequate with stop control on it. However, it was important to our council and the people in that area to have something there to turn left with, and more importantly, to get pedestrians across that main street. You may see the same at Canyon. It may not have the amount of traffic on there that necessitates a signal necessarily, but it's heavily utilized for getting across that Jackson Boulevard and taking lefts there from Canyon. So those are things we'll all consider before we make our final decisions on it.
When you talk about traffic counts, and I know, from what I understand, you're doing them currently, how does that change, and how do you model what the traffic looks like now as opposed to in the summer when we have tourists?
Well, they'll use a combination of counts. They'll use current, and DOT has a lot of counts on more of our major intersections. So they'll utilize past counts, existing counts, and try to project out to probably a 20 or 30-year projection on what that intersection may look like. Because we don't want to build something in 5 years. Oh, we've got too much traffic. We need a signal now. So they'll consider that too. And if there's something that, the count's not there quite yet, but we project in 10 years that we need a signal here, well, maybe we won't put a signal, but we might put conduit under the road so we can build one without tearing up the road in the future, things like that. Yes, sir.
On the Hungry Hollow drainage basin, have you considered doing some upstream detention to slow that water?
We actually talked about that with the consultant. They said maybe the long-term, most beneficial long-term improvement to that would be going and doing some upstream drainage, detention upstream on some undeveloped land and limit that flow that comes down versus spending hundreds of thousands of dollars getting yet another sewer trunk line out there that may take up a 10 to 20 year event underground, because we're still going to have to rely on that street to convey that flow down to the stream. So yes, it's a very good point and a very good concept. Probably a lot cheaper too. So those are things we're going to look at.
I just want to let people know, you mentioned the LED lighting. We currently have one LED street light up at the corner of Grant and Main, as kind of a trial to see how it fits into our program. And
Those of you in
analyzing.
Canyon also.
Okay. This will be analyzing those costs, but if you're interested in how that looks, those are the locations that you want to currently have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, yeah, just expect more on Jackson Boulevard. It looks like we'll have a full year of that conversation going on. I want to introduce Chief Sahara, Chief Mark Sahara. He's our fire chief. He has gotten 6 months in on the job. We're happy to have him here. He's been doing a lot of planning, doing a lot of work on this, and we wanted him to share a little bit because it was a big issue, a big conversation issue. So I want to introduce Mark and have him talk a little bit on the fire department.
Okay, well, thanks for coming here, as others have said, on a cold night. Glad to see some faces today. I'm going to kind of shotgun things. Some's going to be about the fire department, and I'm going to cover a couple other topics that definitely relate to the fire department. But start out with saying, as Joe mentioned, very new to the community, but it was, truly proud to be here, but also it was a humbling experience to be the first paid individual of the fire department in its history. So I really appreciate the opportunity. So what has happened with the city making this transition from all volunteer to a small contingent of career staff was that the fire department changed from all volunteer to what now has become considered a combination fire department. In our country, we have all career departments, all volunteer, and then we have these departments that are in between. And the departments that have some paid, some volunteer are called combination. As an example, one of the larger combination departments is Prince George County in Maryland, and they have over 1,000 volunteers and about 700 career staff. So you can see there's very different variations of combination department. We're really, for all intents and purposes, still volunteer. There's going to be 3 of us. The new assistant chief starts on Monday, and his duties will be very heavily oriented towards training to keep the interest of volunteers. Training has been identified not just here but national studies that's probably the most important aspect of retaining volunteers. We can recruit volunteers, and I'm going to have a recruitment brochure that I'll pass out that we developed. And recruiting sometimes isn't that difficult, but what's hard is to retain folks. They hear about the fire department, they get initially very interested, but that interest can taper off if we don't hold them. And what holds them in some departments, like Prince George, is a tremendous call volume. I think that department is pushing 100,000 calls a year. We're talking a heavily populated part of our country. They also include a large rural area, so their department has rural engine companies and very urban engine companies, and they run medical calls. So with Spearfish not running medical calls and only fire calls, our call volume is actually pretty low. We fluctuate between 150 to maybe just over 200 in some of the years that they've been a little bit busier. It's not really a lot as far as fire departments go. So to hold the folks, and of those 200 calls, how many are truly a big house fire, which we don't like to see, but if you're a firefighter, that's what you train for, and you get a house fire, it does keep their interest. So out of the 150, 200 calls we have, not all those are fires. Now, we go to gas leaks, we do go to rescue. While we don't run medical, we do run rescue from the standpoint of assisting the ambulance, like the other night, you probably read in the paper about that head-on or partial head-on collision on the interstate. So we used what most people refer to as the jaws of life tool to extricate the driver of the passenger vehicle that struck the semi. So we do run that. I don't know if I mentioned gas leaks, and then we get alarm calls. Have an alarm at Dorset House today, a room that was exceptionally warm for a heater that was running, and it tripped a combination smoke heat alarm. So we have those calls in the mix, and so what holds their interest then is if we have training that is very pertinent to what their field of interest is. And in the past, to be a member of the department, you had to be fully trained firefighter. And we've developed a model now that is indicated in the brochure because the department also provides search and rescue. So just this past weekend, they moved the snowmobiles from outside to indoors, checked them all out, and got that equipment ready. So if we have an injured snowmobiler or just somebody lost hunter where we need the capability to go over the snow to get to them, we can do that. And then we have some of the department members are qualified in rope rescue. So up in the canyon, if we have an injured climber or even a car over the edge to get a patient from a car that's over the edge in the canyon, it usually takes ropes to hook onto the stretcher to get them up. So what we're going to do now is make the opportunity available for the volunteers that may just have an interest in search and rescue. Where I came from, the county oversaw search and rescue, and they had search and rescue complete dedicated unit that they provided equipment and training for. Here, it's a mix of Lawrence County assisting some, but in our area, mostly it's the fire department volunteers that do dual duty as search and rescue and providing fire service. So what it's doing is it's allowing us to expand the volunteer base. We may have individuals that don't have the interest of putting on a breathing apparatus and crawling down smoky hallways. Either they physically can't or just don't have that interest. But there's probably a number of people out in the community that do have an interest in search and rescue, as an example. So that's going to open up a chance for us to sort of diversify, gain more members, and if we had an extended search, the people that just like search and rescue could be out doing that and wouldn't be depleting our force of capable firefighters. So what else I wanted to touch on was what impacts what we have to do. And one of the things that is really affecting modern firefighting is just as you look around this room, if this would have been in the 1800s, we probably wouldn't have carpet. And if we did have carpet, it would probably be wool carpet. Actually, dating myself, but in the house that I grew up in, we had wall-to-wall carpet. It wasn't that long ago that that didn't exist, but it was wool carpet. So the furniture was hardwood furniture. So again, in the old days, you'd probably be sitting in a room with all oak chairs, for instance. The walls would be more than likely lath and plaster, and you'd have heavy beam construction. So what do we have now? We're sitting in plastic chairs. I think maybe the only leather chairs are maybe the council chairs.
I don't think they're.
And they're not leather, okay. So they're simulated leather. And then in the old days, if you had a padded chair, it had cotton batting, and it was probably cotton or wool fabric that covered the chair. So we're sitting in a room with synthetic carpet, plastic chairs, composite wood, and I don't know if it's metal trusses here or if it's wood trusses. So everything is lightweight, and what does that mean? Well, you can go online and look at video on UL's site, but I can explain it to you. If this was an old house, a historic house, we could start a fire in the corner of the room, say, something that started in a chair, and it would take at least a half hour before this entire room reached what we call flashover.
And flashover means is if Joe's the firefighter, he pops that door, and this room is ready to light off. In the old days, it took at least a half an hour for that situation to occur. And nowadays, it can be as little as 3 minutes. Typically, it's anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. Well, Chief, what does that mean? What that means is that, especially with a volunteer fire department, number one, it takes about 2 minutes from a citizen to pick up the phone, notify the police department's dispatch, and for that call to finally get pushed out to the fire department. That's about what it takes. So the fire is still burning. And now, in our case, it takes the firefighters, I've been doing a real informal study, but it's taking them on a good day here downtown, like today for this alarm at Dorset, they were probably up station in 3 minutes. Most of the time, it's taking about 5, just for them to get from their homes. And you can imagine on a snowy night, like when it was actually snowing the other night, if they don't have the luxury of a garage, they've got to clean off their truck, and then, get it, they can see out the window and get to the station. So once they get to the station, then we've got to go through the process again, getting the vehicle started, getting dressed with their turnout gear, and then going to the call. It's taking around 10 minutes or longer for us to reach the scene, from the time of dispatch all the way till the time that you see that fire truck on the scene. So my goal is, as we progress, both with more volunteers or a different model of use of the volunteers, is to try to bring that response time down, both for our own health and safety, but to also be able to get there in time to make a difference. If it takes that long, depending on the nature of the fire, we could get there for rescue and hope that everybody's out, but are we really saving any further property damage? A lot of times not, because in 10 minutes or longer, a fire is going to have too much of a head start on us. So recruitment has started to go pretty good through all the issues of the volunteers transitioning to the city. We did lose some volunteers, but we're on the upswing now. We're finding that recruitment is increasing. And we have the capacity, the old capacity, to probably exceed that, but in days gone by, there was a number of around 60 was the max that the department could carry. And we've been staying right around 50. We were down to, I think, right at 50, maybe just under. But currently we're back up to around 55. So we haven't seen a whole lot of change with the actual number of members. We do have a little time to get these people trained, and with our new assistant chief, we'll be putting on our own academy once again. The volunteers used to put on an academy annually where the firefighters were trained to South Dakota standard to become certified as what they call firefighter 1 and 2. The last 2 years, just gone by, but currently we have one member in an academy over at Belfouche. Well, starting in January, we'll be able to get back to doing our own academy, and that'll be a good thing. It'll help with this process. So, I made a couple of notes. I didn't think I need them, but I want to check to make sure I covered what I wanted to. The big point then too, where it involves citizens, and why I wanted to give you all a brochure, so if you yourself aren't interested in volunteering, maybe you know someone, a relative or a friend, we can pass this information on to. So my point, as I start talking with business groups and the sports groups and different people over at the college, to kind of go back to where I started with the nature of our department still being predominantly volunteer. What does that really mean, especially to a new citizen? They know they can pick up the phone, call 911, and a fire truck gets there, but I don't think they grasp what it takes to get that fire truck there. So some of you may be newer to the community, some of you may have been here a while, and I would ask do you really realize what it means to have a community fire department? And what it means, because 60 firefighters sounds like a lot, but in a community of 12,000 here in the city, but really 15,000 when we count our county residents that are right on our border, that's tiny little amount. I just can't fathom what would happen if everybody said, well, somebody will volunteer. Because what would happen? No one's going to come to your house fire. No one's going to come to save a business downtown if we don't have volunteers that step up. And it's truly a community effort. So that's my message to everyone that I've been talking to is take to heart the fact that if we don't have people to step up and volunteer, that could mean your emergency, your neighbors, or the place you work. And so if there's any business people in the room, the message is the same, because I've heard from some of the volunteers that their boss won't let them go to a fire. Now, I can understand if they work at something that is a critical job where that's an impossibility. So let's say a school teacher. You know, they're in the classroom with these kids. They can't just drop and leave, you know, a bunch of third and fourth graders and just say, hey, principal, I got to go to a fire. That probably isn't reality. Or somebody that works at the hospital. In some cases, the police department. Some towns, police do both. But again, depending on the situation, you know, Pat's guys, they could be, you know, in the middle of a traffic stop or something more important, and they just can't do it. So some jobs, it doesn't make sense. Here at the city, because I know we have a lot of staff in here, take this message to heart and think about whether you are somebody that's capable of doing it, or you know someone that's capable of doing it, and help spread the word. And then others that have jobs where, hey, you know, if I really bent my boss's ear and made him or her get this reality that our town won't be protected without volunteers, and volunteers have to feed their families and make a living. But can some of these businesses allow their people be a little flexibility? And I'm not saying that they would allow them to go to like this Dorset house, what was basically I wouldn't say a false alarm, but it wasn't a true emergency. It was an alarm, a smoke alarm going off. It had a reason why it was going off, because we do go to some of their malfunctions, and I call those false alarms. Today was legitimate, but it wasn't an emergency, and it didn't come in as an emergency. They called and said this room is really hot. They weren't sure what was going on. But that type of alarm, I could see a business person saying, no, we're not going to want you to go to that type of a call. If it comes in as a fire call, I would hope that some would start to rethink this and figure out if there's a way that they can allow their folks that are interested in volunteering to help us with these emergencies. So that's all I got. I like the town hall thing, and I hope that maybe some of you have some questions. Don't know if I have all the answers. I am pretty darn new, but not new to the fire service, but here in Spearfish. So, anybody have any questions? Wondering how things are working with the fire department? Does anybody want to volunteer?
Mark, you said you were going to hand out those brochures, I think.
Yeah. There we go.
Your last speech I found compelling. Have you thought about taking that to some of the service organizations?
I've got the same message to all of them. So far, I've only had the opportunity to speak with Kiwanis, but I've been reaching out to the Lions Club, and because they have, I guess, pretty good turnout at their meetings, and I'm hoping to make one of those, as well as I'm in the Spearfish Leadership Program right now, and a new dean at the college is also in there, and she has given me some really good contacts at the college, so I'm going to head down there and not have a huge auditorium, but try to meet with specific groups over there and then reach out to them. And we're doing pretty good at the college right now. If you want to go, say, percentage-wise, we've gotten 3 new members that have all been from the college. And the thing with the college is, though, unless they're planning to stay in Spearfish, we just signed up a young man, a football player there, freshman, By the time he gets his training, we'll have 3 years that he'll be with us fully trained. But if they don't decide to stay in Spearfish, then we lose them. There is some cost wrapped up in them. If they stay a full 3 years, I'd be happy. But if they stay longer, that's better. The cost, just to give you an idea, at a minimum with employer-related expenses, a career firefighter on the low end with the employer costs would really be about $35,000 a year. So when we've got, out of the 50 volunteers, let's say 20 of them, because usually you've got a 1/3 ratio. If you have 60 volunteers, you'll have about 1/3 that are always there regular. And in our case, if we have some of the 60 are just there for the purpose of search and rescue, you know, we may have 40 that say, 45 that say, yep, we're firefighters, but of those 45, how many make all the calls and all the training? So they're really on the upper end and well-trained to handle a serious type fire. I mean, ones that have lower level of training, they could certainly go in with somebody with that had some experience to say what we call a room and contents fire, one room, piece of furniture, some trash burning, that type of thing, mattress fire in a motel, versus if we have a fire in the downtown section, old building with a basement, we're not gonna want inexperienced people going into that type of building. We're gonna want people with experience. So how many do we have? And that's why we've got to get them trained as quickly as we can so that they can handle that type of emergency. So when you invest in them after they go through their basic training, the ones that get to a level where they could be at a captain level to take charge of a 3-person crew or more, what other additional classes have we paid for them to go to? And that's where then, if they're only with us 3 years, you start thinking, man, we got a lot of money tied up in this individual only to lose them. Some of it just goes along with the volunteer department. Spearfish has been very fortunate over the years to have members that did stay for a very long time. We've got a lot of members that are over 20 years. And that's what we hope to continue to gain, is to gain some people that have ownership in the community. Anybody else got any questions? I'll pass out along the brochure for those that want one. Grab one. I don't know I have enough for everyone, so I'd say probably staff doesn't need one, but anybody else, I say, and if it's not for you, see if you've got anybody that you know that you could share that information in there.
Thank you, Mark. Let me do some introductions very quickly. You've met Mayor Bogue. Pam Jacobs is a council member for us, serving in her first term. And Larry Clarenbeek, who has just stepped out of the room, is our other council member, and he'll be back in just a little bit. We'll save the tough questions for him.
Yes.
We have Jana Watson, our planning director, over here. Pat Roeder, our chief of police. Dave Dutton, our finance officer. Carla Weber is actually the person that runs the city. She's administrative assistant, does a lot of different things. And then Cheryl Johnson, our public works administrator. And we got Caleb too. Yeah, I know. So he's out here and listening in. So the next portion of this is kind of the open forum type process. And so those of you that have attended these in the past, what I do is I take the questions from the floor, I will write them up here on the board. The reason I do that is in case there are similar questions on various issues, we can compile them together and give a full response for any one of those topics. If we just take them from the floor, then we may not address something within that matter. And so that's kind of the process. And so at this point in time, I will open it up to the floor. What would you like to talk about?
I don't want to, spend a ton of time on it, but I think it still has to do with Jackson stuff. and I was at one of these meetings last year, and we talked about bicycle infrastructure. I feel like sometimes the city's still thinking about bicycle infrastructure being recreational use, and I want you guys, I hope that you'll start thinking about it being transportation too. So like how we function through Main Street is, it's kind of like you've drawn it out, so you go to Main Street and then you park your bike at one of the designated areas, and then you walk through Main Street.
Sure.
And that's not really what some of us are doing. It's a mode of transportation, maybe not hard to do it. And then while you're doing that, the Jackson Boulevard thing, it just makes sense to me to keep thinking that way, especially with the campus.
Okay, and yeah, let's walk through that in a little bit here and go all the way through there. What else you want to talk about? What are the other topics? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I used to finish that. Did you talk about Spearfish training?
They have not. We can. We can at least talk about to the level we can talk about it. But Spearfish Canyon, I'm assuming the state park. Yep. All right. What else? Yes, sir.
I would be interested in learning about the city's long-term perspective on population growth.
Population
What our
growth,
city
long-term.
looks like in 50 or 100 years, or at the end of my lifetime.
Sure. Okay. What else? Yes, sir.
With the update on the volunteering for committees, is there anything on the Art and Public Places committee?
Okay. Okay, I saw a hand start, yes.
So mine's probably mundane, but I am curious. I've only lived here 2 years, and I'm curious about the history of putting all the snow in a pile on St. Joe Street in a neighborhood in the middle of the night when there's lots of noise and it makes a lot of noise.
Sure.
And not only is it the noise issue, because I live over there, I'm curious about all the salt and runoff going into the creek.
Mhm.
If the creek's one of our great assets, how is that affecting them?
All right. I know we have a history with snow removal that we can kind of cover, so. All right. 'Tis the season for snow removal. What else? We can add to it if necessary? Yes.
Some student involvement opportunities around the city.
Student involvement opportunities. Well, you know, they are looking for volunteer firefighters. Yes, student involvement opportunities. Okay, anything else you want to add to the list? And otherwise, we'll get started. Randy stepped out of the room. I was going to introduce Randy, and we'll wait till he gets back here because I was going to put him on the spot for some of the bicycle infrastructure and such. So we'll jump down, and Spearfish Canyon Park. What would you like to hear about? What would you like to know? The City Council first received a report from Game Fish and Parks this Monday. That was the first time that they presented to the City Council as to what their plans are and where they want to go. So what would you like to hear and what would you like to know?
I want to know what Spearfish people feel. What I hear in the cafes and stuff, they want less like it is. And I was at Christy Young's townhouse in Spirit in Belfast. There was 70 to 75 people there. She thought that it was all taken care of that people wanted it here, and the governor was pushing for it. And so her and Thurman had a bill, which I.
Correct.
And that bill was in favor of the switching of the land. But when she brought it up, Christie brought it up at Belfouche, that a couple weeks ago, she said, how many people here on the 70 or 75 that were at that meeting are in favor of changing? Nobody. And I thought, well, Belfouche was that way. How does Spearfish feel? Because I've never heard a thing. So I called for a politician. Because it was going to meet over here, there was only 20 people showed up on this little construction stuff. And in fact, I'm surprised when you advertised in the paper that this was going to be on the agenda tonight. I'm surprised the Spearfish people aren't.
Yeah.
What I hear in the cafes is leave it as it is. It isn't good. I mean, why spend money? They say we got financial problems right now. We can switch. The federal and the state are working together, and they like it the way it looks. Don't conflict with downtown campgrounds and stuff like the people that want to camp come there. So I wanted to know what.
Can I?
Oh, yeah, we'll let the mayor cover some of that because.
I'm gonna stand up so you can see me back there. I agree with you, at the current time, it's working well, but it's very, very used. And so they're looking for the future. Is it going to remain in the state it is? And it's probably being overused. And so they're trying, the idea is behind protection. And yes, there are quite a few. I have heard